What's up? What's up? What's up? We are back for another live. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me. You might hear some noise in the background because I am currently in Vietnam. And one thing about Vietnam, when you are in the city, especially in the city, there's lots, even lots more motorbikes than Thailand. Lots of honking too. They love to honk, mostly because they like to let people know that they're coming through the corners because a lot of the some of the streets don't have street lights, so the traffic is just flowing. So hopefully y'all can hear me, and we're gonna have a great show for tonight. Let me just check here on the other end. Hopefully y'all can hear me. We're gonna get started. All right. So for those who are joining us tonight, this episode 4 of our series on what happens when you feel lost. We've talked about what it feels like to outgrow your old life. We've also talked about feeling disconnected and why decisions feel really hard to make sometimes, and how just the tiny choices that we make in our lives shift a lot more than we think. And so definitely go back and check out those other 3 episodes. And then we have one more episode in this series coming next week. But even if you haven't checked out the other episodes, this tonight is going to be, um, I think, worth your while as well. Let me just make sure I'm not freezing on the other end. All right. So this is what I see that's happening. I see it happening with my clients. And even with this episode, this is near and dear to me because it's something that I've struggled with practically my entire life. And it's still things that I still have to keep an eye out for, uh, so that I don't drift back. But there are moments where you start honoring yourself more, and suddenly there's sort of like this, I'd call internal backlash. Like part of you is fighting against the very thing that you want most, and that's where a lot of resistance begins to show up even more. So we're gonna dive into what's actually happening in those moments, and hopefully it gives you a bit more clarity and a way forward. Just take a look here. So we didn't have a live 2 weeks ago because I was traveling to Vietnam, and then last week jet lag hit me like crazy, and I was totally out of it. I didn't know what day it was, what time it was, but even though I took a lot of supplements just to keep my energy up, it wasn't enough. And I was going to sleep at, like, I don't know, sometimes 7 p.m., 6, waking up at weird hours of the night. And so doing a live at that time just didn't make sense with my body. And so this is why we are here today, um, 2 weeks later. So I'm glad that some of you were patient, and hopefully, like I said, this is will be worth your while. Also drinking some black ginger tea. All right. All right. So that moment when you change your mind right after maybe hitting send on a text message. You're like, "Ooh, I shouldn't have sent that." Or maybe when you apologize for something that you're not necessarily sorry for, or when you second guess the boundary that you just set. So there's that voice in your head that questions every decision that you make. The one that says, maybe I'm wrong, right after you finally get solid on something. And I always say that's not your inner critic. That's a part of you that learned being authentic could cost you everything. And I know that sounds a bit counterintuitive, and maybe it sounds a bit dramatic. You're like, Francis, that sounds really dramatic. But you'll understand when we start making these connections of why this is so important and how much it could literally derail your entire life. So it's really important to understand the connections. But we've been taught that self doubt is some sort of a confidence problem. But what if it's actually your nervous system trying to protect you from something that happened years ago. And if that's starting to resonate, the connection between your nervous system and trust, let me know in the comments below. Because what I'm about to share will change how you see every moment of self doubt that you've ever had. And so by the end of this conversation that we're having together, you'll understand exactly where that voice came from. And stay towards the end because I'm going to give you one practice, just one, that if you actually do it, will begin to change your life. See, we experience everything through our nervous system. Every decision, every relationship, every moment of trust or doubt. But here's what most people don't realize when they try to build or rebuild self trust. You can't build what got disrupted earlier on. And so this isn't about learning to trust yourself. It's about healing the part of you that learned trusting yourself meant losing connection. Again, it's all going to make sense. And so today we're talking about the real reason you might find it hard to trust yourself, especially when it comes to making decisions, big decisions, small decisions. And again, it's not about confidence or decision making skills. It's about what your body came to believe over time, that love and safety weren't always the same thing. Again, if this is resonating with you, please do me a favor and like the video, subscribe if you want to remain connected. But liking the video truly helps to grow this channel and get the message out to those who need to hear it. So thank you for doing that. All right, so let me describe something that you probably know very well. Maybe you've never told anyone about it. So, for example, maybe you're at work and your boss asks for your opinion about something. And for a split second, you have a clear thought, maybe a genuine perspective, but instead of sharing it, you hear yourself saying, I'm not sure. What do you think? Are you one of those, I'm not sure, what do you think, folks? If you are, I totally get it. Or maybe you're with friends planning a trip, maybe a night out, and you know exactly where you'd love to go, what you want to do, but you say something like, I'm flexible, whatever works for everyone, right? And afterwards, when you say that, and you feel this sort of weird emptiness, like you disappeared from your own life. You're there, but you're not really there. Or maybe it's more subtle than that. Maybe you've gotten so good at not having preferences that when someone asks you what you want, your mind literally goes blank, right? Not because you're indecisive, but because wanting things has become associated with risks. And so let me know in the comments if you've never told anyone that sometimes you don't know what you want because wanting things feels unsafe. And you might not be able to make that connection now, right? Maybe it's something that you need to sit with, process a little bit, and see if that's true for you. And as we continue to on with our conversation, maybe more connections begin to make. So, what's actually happening here is that somewhere along the way, your system learned that having needs, opinions, or even desires made you a problem. So, it created this really elegant solution. You stop having them, or at least you stop trusting them, right? So, now every time you even consider what you actually want, your body treats it like a threat. Maybe your throat might tighten. Sometimes we get that lump in our throats, right? Your chest may get heavy. And maybe your mind starts calculating all the ways this could go wrong. So it's not anxiety about making the wrong choice, it's terror about being too much. And so the interesting irony about all this is that the people in your life have no idea who you really are, right? How could they? You've become really skilled at being who they needed you to be, that your authentic self has literally gone underground. Let me know if this is resonating. Um, so maybe you wake up one day and realize you've lost touch with your own preferences, your own voice, your own desires. You've become literally a stranger to yourself. And the scariest part, it happened so gradually that it felt like you're just aging with time, right? You're just growing up. And you can sense this from a lot of people who often sometimes go through like a midlife crisis, or they make big dramatic changes in their lives that people don't necessarily understand. Like they're fed up with something and they make decisions that literally disrupt their entire lives. And they do so out of self preservation. And I could definitely relate to that because that's what I did. I literally did and made a lot of decisions that was more out of self preservation because I felt lost in that sense where I just wasn't connecting with my own voice. And I felt like each decision that I made got bigger and riskier over time. And it seemed like I thought it out, but not. Well, in hindsight, I'm like, did I really think that through? But I have no regrets. So it started off small, like, I just kind of moved out of my hometown. And everyone was like, "Oh, why are you going over to the, city of Boston area?" Because I grew up in the suburbs, and then I moved from that area, and I moved out of the state, and everyone was like, "Oh, why are you going there? You got no family." And I just kept ramping it up, and until I just left. I bought a one-way ticket and I left, and that literally turned my whole world and life upside down, culturally, uh, relationship wise, and career wise. And sometimes we need that shakeup to make sense of things. But sometimes we don't necessarily need to go through that if we start to just connect the dots beforehand and we start being more reflective about our lives. But one thing I do want you to remember is that there was a time when you knew exactly who you were. I'm talking about when you were maybe 4 or 5 years old, maybe a little younger, maybe a little older. You had these maybe favorite colors that made no logical sense. You had strong opinions about which socks felt right, and you just had to wear those socks. Or maybe you had an outfit that you loved to wear as a kid. You knew immediately if you liked someone or something or not, right? You trusted your body's signals, your gut reactions, your immediate responses. You didn't need to check with anyone else to know what felt good or what felt wrong. And so that wasn't naivete, that was pure wisdom that hadn't been untouched. Right? I always say that, I tell this to all my clients, that we're all born in the purest form, right? And as we get older and as we grow and develop, things happen that disrupt that purity. And I believe that our journey is to get back to that pure thought, that pure state of being. The original design is what I like to call it. And so here's the question that changes everything. What if losing touch with yourself wasn't inevitable? What if it was actually an intelligent adaptation, or and let me say that again. What if it was actually an adaptation to circumstances that no longer exists, right? And what if you could find your way back? And that's the work. The work is about finding our way back again to that original design before it was tainted by parents, adults, circumstances, trauma, all of the things that happened in our lives. So, drop a comment if you're ready to understand how this adaptation formed and why your system still thinks it needs to protect you this way, because what comes next isn't just pure insight, it's the beginning of getting back in touch to your most authentic self. Again, your original self, as I like to call it. Let me grab a little tea here. I definitely see some of y'all watching. Definitely hit me up in the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. All right. So when you admit to yourself or maybe to someone else that, really, I don't really trust myself, I don't really trust my decisions, there's usually a standard feedback. It's always the same. You often hear, listen, just be more confident. Trust your gut, stop doubting so much. Just trust it. Whatever it is, just trust it all. But here's the truth about that. Your nervous system learned early on that speaking your truth felt actually risky. So it treats authenticity like a threat. So no pep talk, no motivational, inspirational Instagram posts can erase decades of being taught it's safer to shrink and stay small. So think back to offering maybe your honest opinion and seeing maybe there was a silent shrug, somebody kind of ignored it, or even hearing like somebody, sign and say, oh, there they go again, not again. You see, those tiny shutdowns taught you over time to mute your own voice. So confidence isn't the cure, it's the outcome. You'll only feel confident once you've reclaimed trust in your own inner guidance. That's the only time you're going to start feeling confident. Okay. And if you're curious what lies beneath that urge to hide your true voice, what early survival messages kept you small or keeping you small, my free mini course guides you step by step to uncover the root of that resistance and gently retrain your nervous system to welcome your authenticity. Links in the description. So when you try to just trust yourself and it doesn't stick, right? You go back to the way things were, you end up feeling like everyone has some sort of manual that, and you're the only one missing the pages to that manual. Like, I didn't get the self trust section of this book. There it goes. You hear the honking. The traffic has begun. It's 7 a.m. here. And one thing that when we landed here back in Vietnam, when we landed here 2 weeks ago in Vietnam, it was like over 100 degrees, humidity. And I was saying to my partner, I love the heat and I don't mind a little humidity, but that wet heat, it was felt like I was suffocating. And I was really having a hard time adjusting to the heat. And I was like, you know what? I mean, we can just get back on another flight and just go somewhere else because this heat was so disrespectful that I couldn't think clearly. I was very irritable, but it has calmed down now. So I'm really thankful for that because 100-degree humidity is not for the faint of heart. All right. So, like I was saying, when you try to just trust yourself and often it doesn't stick, you find yourself going back and forth, regressing. Understand that this isn't about techniques. All right. It's about unearthing and clearing away the old beliefs that convinced you self doubt was safer than showing up as who you truly are. Again, if you're enjoying this live or even on the replay, please like and subscribe and comment. When you do, that helps the channel to grow and more people can begin changing their lives as well by connecting to this message. So I appreciate you in advance for doing that. So here's what's actually happening. Here's what's actually happened to your self trust and why every confidence tip didn't work as well. And maybe again, it didn't last. And you went back to not trusting yourself again. Self trust was supposed to grow through what psychologists and therapists called co regulation. Okay. And that's just a fancy term that says having someone alongside you who helped you make sense of your feelings in real time. This is why being in community is such a powerful way to heal because you get to experience that co regulation in the moment. So, when you were a little kid and you felt scared, excited, angry, or sad, you needed an adult to say, I see that you're upset. That makes sense. And so that response taught you that your feelings mattered. You felt seen. And a lot of my conversations with clients is that they didn't feel seen growing up. And that's a lot of our stories in different ways. We just didn't feel seen. And so that self trust hasn't been built. So what we heard instead, many of us, was like, listen, you're fine, or even stop crying or stop being so upset, don't be so dramatic, right? Or some of us got complete silence when we needed someone to acknowledge us, right? To really see us in that moment. And not getting that really created a marker for us, like a scar that traveled with us through time. And so there are four core shutdowns your nervous system learned, which you'll see the connection in a bit. I'm getting too far ahead of myself. But the first core shutdown, the dismisser, again, you're overreacting. Maybe you had somebody in your family that literally consistently dismissed your emotions. And then you had the corrector, that's number two. Someone that says, that's not how it happened. Although you know that's how it happened, right? Your experience tells you that's how it happened. And somebody kept telling you, no, that's not exactly it. So you started to doubt your senses, right? Well, maybe they're right. And then number three, we have the mood manager who would tell you, don't upset everyone. So you had someone telling you regularly not to cause a rift, which probably showed you that confrontation wasn't safe. So that meant that you couldn't have clarity. You couldn't have the conversations that you needed to have because you just didn't want to upset anybody. You don't want to be a burden. I hear that often from a lot of my clients. They don't want to be a burden with their needs, right? And then the last one, number four, the achievement trap. Nice work, but you could do better, right? If you experience any of these, then part of you shut down just a little bit. And whether you recognize one or all of these, the message was very clear that your feelings can't be trusted. But not only that, they can't be safely held in the container, in the space, right? And so it became hard for you to trust yourself and trust others. And here's the wild part, listen to this very closely. You still attract people who replay those same messages, partners who downplay you, friends who question you, and maybe even work situations where your needs got ignored. So, your life right now could be, if this message is resonating, your life right now is proof that childhood script is still active. It's still showing up in your life. Speaking up continues to feel unsafe. So, you stop trusting yourself and you replayed those childhood dynamics over and over again. No wonder, right? You stopped trusting yourself because those same scripts are still in your present day. So if part of you still hesitates to speak up or name what you needed, it makes sense. It totally makes sense. And so that hesitation didn't come out of nowhere. It was learned over time to keep you connected, to keep you safe. Okay? That's all the body's doing to keep you safe. But understanding that is only one part of the work, right? Just understanding it and having that insight is only one part of the work. The deeper shift begins when you start offering the part of you a new kind of evidence through lived, repeatable experiences. This means that focusing on what you consistently do when those signals show up because they show up and we often ignore them, we distract ourselves, all those things. So let's begin there. Okay, with one daily act that starts to reintroduce your system to something it might not have experienced in a very long time, the safety of expressing your truth in real time. Let me know if this is making sense. Let me know. So here's the shift that matters the most. Your self-doubt, ooh, your self-doubt isn't a problem. It's useful information, it's data that can powerfully redirect us, right? It's the strategy your nervous system chose to protect the relationships it thought it couldn't survive losing. So every time you feel that familiar pull to retract, whether it's hesitating before speaking, changing your mind after again setting that boundary, or softening your tone to avoid discomfort, there's also a quiet part of you asking, if I really show up here, will I be accepted? And maybe you don't even notice it anymore because it's so blended into your life, right? You say, I don't care because it just feels easier. Maybe you choose what's convenient, not what's true. You shrink it just enough to stay agreeable. And for a moment, things feel smoother on the outside, while something slowly disappears on the inside. And if this connect if and if this is connecting, if this is connecting with you, let me know by typing a 1 in the comments. And if you're watching on the replay, type 2. And that lets me know. All right. And so if you're sitting with all of this and thinking, okay, I get it, but how do I actually shift this pattern? Don't worry. I got you. I got you. And that's exactly what I'm going to guide you through in my free mini course. It's for people who feel ready to stop disconnecting from themselves, but still want to stay rooted in relationships with integrity as they do it. So, links in the description. But I'm going to share with you something right now that you can do. Here's what I want to invite you into. Once a day, no pressure. You don't have to do it every day, but find a rhythm that works for you. But once a day, just once, name your true preference out loud. Not to make a scene or anything like that, not to achieve anything, but simply to stay connected with yourself. And it could be so incredibly small that you're going to think like, oh wow, this doesn't even matter, right? So for example, it could be saying what you actually want for dinner. Maybe choosing a shirt or an outfit that makes you feel most like you. Maybe saying, actually, that doesn't work for me, and letting that be enough. So the action itself isn't the breakthrough. What changes everything is that in the moment, your body stays present instead of bracing or retracting or shrinking, and you don't disappear just to make the moment easier for someone else. That is the breakthrough. And so when you practice this in real time, your nervous system begins to update its map of what's safe. The part of you that learned it was safer to disconnect from your own signals, to smile, to agree or stay quiet, just to stay connected, now gets to witness that honesty doesn't have to mean lost. Okay. And so your body begins to reconnect with the idea that I can stay with myself and still stay in connection. And that's how self trust is built over time, not through force or any sort of performance, but through repeated embodied proof that your presence doesn't threaten love or connection, it actually invites it. Okay. I'm just checking the chat, see if anything's going on. All right. I'm gonna finish my black ginger. There's no sugar, nothing. It's just black ginger is actually pretty strong. Um it's really helpful for like immune system, lowers blood sugar, cholesterol, all that goodness. And in the morning I just take a shot of it. Sometimes I take it in the evening. I send it well wishes and trust that it's doing something beautiful to my body, considering all the Vietnamese coffee that I'm having. I need to balance it out. All right, so I know what might be coming up for you right now. Sometimes I get some pushback from my clients, and it's totally fine. It takes a little while for us to trust that this actually works. So I totally get it. You're not alone in that. Maybe you're thinking, what if I really can't trust myself? Like that's a legit experience. I totally get that. And maybe you're thinking, what if this protective voice that I'm hearing is right? Totally get that. Maybe you're thinking, what if being more honest just leads to disconnection, rejection, or regret? Definitely understand that. Definitely, when I've been honest in certain circumstances or made decisions, it definitely disrupted connection. And honestly, if you were taught, like directly or indirectly, that your feelings were too much or that your perspective couldn't be trusted, it makes complete sense that you'd hesitate right here. But here's what I want you to understand, okay? Your feelings, especially the ones that, your feelings, especially the ones about what you wanted or needed, they're real, they're very valid. And they might not always be instructions of kind of like what to do next. But again, they are always information, they're feedback that is necessary for your growth. And so that's how we embrace them. they tell you something true about your experience, and I believe they're worth listening to even when it's hard. And so, does that mean that every decision you make will lead to a perfect outcome? Absolutely not. This is the game of life. It doesn't lead us in that direction. But in my experience, the decisions that leave the deepest wounds aren't the ones where we trusted ourselves and things got messy. They're the ones where we ignored what felt authentic to keep other people comfortable. All right, let me say that again. They're the ones where we ignored what felt authentic to keep other people comfortable. Okay. And slowly disconnected from ourselves in the process. And so that's the experience that carries the deepest wounds. Okay. It's not telling the truth. It's not telling the truth. That's what carries the deepest wounds. So, somewhere along the way, you learn to manage other people's comfort at the expense of what you felt to be true. And that became the trade off: harmony on the outside, confusion and conflict on the inside. All right. So, you don't have to trust yourself with everything all at once. Again, with the examples that I shared with you earlier, start with the smallest moments. But either way, start, right? Because when you constantly edit yourself to avoid disappointing people, you're maintaining a connection that leaves you out of it. I'm going to say that one more time. When you constantly edit yourself to avoid disappointing other people, you're maintaining a connection that leaves you out of it. All right. So let me know in the comments, type one now or two in the replay if you're ready to bring yourself back into connection, not just with others, but especially with yourself. All right. So you've heard a lot today, not just about why self trust is hard, but about how your body, your relationships, and even your younger self all played a role in that story. Okay. And I know it's not easy. There's a reason resistance shows up. The moment you start to say something that feels true to you, the hesitation, again, is trying to protect what once felt very fragile. And so here's something, deeper practice that I want you to try this week. Okay, just one more thing. Goes a little bit deeper. Each day, or whenever you feel called, in one of those subtle moments, ask yourself this very, very powerful question: what would I choose if I wasn't afraid it would cost me connection? Okay, I'm gonna say it again. What would I choose if I wasn't afraid it would cost me connection? All right, because that's what most resistance to self trust really is. A fear being fully honest might lead to distance, disapproval, or lost. As a former people pleaser, this has been my journey and continues to be my journey. All right. So when you pause and ask that question, you create a new kind of space, a space where your nervous system can learn that being yourself doesn't always lead to some sort of fracture. Okay. And that it's possible to speak your truth and still belong. And if you speak your truth and it does create some sort of fracture, then that connection wasn't worth sacrificing yourself for. Now you need to reflect on whether that connection needs to be a part of your ecosystem. All right. So my screen keeps moving over there. So don't just notice the answer. All right. Notice what happens in your body. Again, don't just notice the answer. Notice what happens in your body. Does your chest constrict? Do your shoulders lift? Right. Or do you feel something settle? Like there's this little relief, like there's a quiet relief entering the room. And you don't have to act on what you find. This practice isn't about forcing change, it's about offering that part of you a different experience, one where your truth gets airtime, all right, even if it's just your own awareness. And if you try this even once, come back and let me know what shifted, not what you decided, just what it felt like to just stay with your truth instead of resisting it. Just leave me a comment under this video or send me an email. I'd love to hear it. All right, we're nearing the end. And Here's what I really want you to take in. Your self doubt is evidence of how adaptive you were, how quickly you learned to sense what others needed and who you had to become to keep connection intact. All right. And so, this work of rebuilding self trust isn't about forcing confidence or repeating affirmations. It's about slowly teaching the part of you that adapted for survival, that it no longer has to. All right. And that your needs are valid, that your voice doesn't put connection at risk, and you don't have to change who you are or water yourself down just to be accepted. Now, if you want to explore this more gently at your own pace, there's a free mini course in the description that can help you begin that. How to finally get unstuck without becoming someone you're not. But if you're ready for something way deeper, if you're craving structure, community, and real time support as you relearn how to trust yourself, then I want to invite you to the Resistance Reset. It's my 8 week live journey where we do this work together, not in theory, but through guided practices, coaching, and weekly integration designed to meet the parts of you that still feel hesitant, afraid, or unsure. And we start 2026. And we move through it as a group, but we meet you as you are, no pressure to perform, just to support you should have had a long time ago. And here's something I need to say. As you begin to trust yourself more, not everyone will know how to meet you there. Some people may miss the version of you that was easy, agreeable, predictable. And so that discomfort, it's theirs to hold, not yours to solve. All right? Again, people are going to miss that version of you and it's going to feel uncomfortable, but that's their discomfort. Let them hold it. It's not yours to solve or make them feel better because of it. All right? So this isn't just about making better choices, although we did talk about that in previous episodes. It's about returning to a version of you that never had to second guess what you felt. It's about remembering how to live in your body without apology and letting that be enough. So next week we're going to the final episode of this 5-part series, Distraction. Why your attention gets hijacked the moment you get close to something that feels true, something authentic. Why your mind creates diversions just when you're about to make a move. And what that reveals about your relationship to momentum, risk, and of course, just overall self trust. So if something clicked today and you felt something like, oh, this makes sense, definitely drop maybe a heart in the chat. And tell me this, what's the earliest moment you remember second guessing your own voice? Let's put a name to it so it doesn't keep shaping your life from behind the scenes. Remember, you were born with a deep, unshakable knowing. You knew when something felt wrong. You knew what you liked. You knew how to ask for what you needed. That knowing didn't vanish, it just went quiet. And now it's time to invite it back. So this week, you begin that return to your body, to your voice, most importantly, to yourself. So thank you for watching. And of course, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video. It really helps the channel to grow and helps us build community. Again, thank you for watching, and I'll see you on the other side of change.